We're going to kick off this week with kind of straight from the tweets, right to the pod is how I feel about this. If you've been paying attention to the changes in the kind of venture capital, tech money world, you're bored of SPACs, which is fine because we have a whole new thing to nerd out about, which are rolling funds. And it's a new way to deploy VC capital. And our own Natasha wrote a piece about it and is going to tell us what the hell they are.
Yeah. So, the reason I like rolling funds more than SPACs is that they are easier to understand. Both are kind of accessible, but rolling funds make more sense. The best way to think of it is like how AngelList's CEO Avla Coley described it, which is how a venture fund structure would look like if it was built in the age of software. So think of it as an investment vehicle that raises money through a quarterly subscription from investors. You have to kind of do a minimum commit for 1 year, but after that, you can kind of re-up. And a lot of emerging fund managers are using it. We talked about Sahil from Gumroad a couple weeks ago, but we've seen about 70 rolling funds kind of close between February and August.
What does it mean for a rolling fund to close?
Good question. So basically, it is arbitrary, kind of similar to traditional funds where you have your first close. You can have an amount that you try to get to. And AngelList kind of said that people have been creating their own mini caps in order to kind of feel ready to announce to the world. I know with Sahil's fund, he kind of announced it at 5 million, but it's already at 7 million just a month later. But when you hear 5 million or 7 million, you think of it as kind of a quarterly commit, a annual look at how the fund is going to have its total capital.
I think these are great. Danny, you've actually been in the VC world. Are these amateur vehicles for noobs, or are these neat ways to approach capital in a new way?
I think it's like the lean startup model applied to venture funds. I mean, in the traditional venture world, you have to raise from LPs in advance. So you raise on a blank check. You're raising and saying, look, I'm a smart person. I'm with a smart partner. Give me money and I'm able to invest. That can take a long time, right? It's not uncommon for people to spend 2, even 3 years raising from LPs to do their debut fund. With rolling funds, you can almost start immediately. Right, there's this opportunity to say, hey, I have a couple of friends, I have a couple of people interested. I can write 10K checks starting next month. And that opens up the doors to a lot more folks who have traditionally been locked out of the industry. So I'm really excited about that. I think the challenge here is, there's less of that commitment from LPs. In the traditional fund model, you spend a lot of work building relationships, but on the flip side, you actually have a fund that has a dedicated resource pool of capital to invest from. With rolling funds, it's a lot more haphazard, right? You're going to have more money, less money over time as people kind of join and leave. And so to me, it's a compromise, right? It's a faster way to get started. My guess is it ends up being a pathway to traditional funds for a whole new generation of VC managers.
On that note, too, I think one of the flagship qualities and controversial qualities of a rolling fund is a SEC regulation that allows anyone who starts the fund to raise in public, talk about their process, solicit, which traditional funds can't do. And so, Danny, when I hear the words kind of like emerging generation of fund managers, I think a lot about how it's going to be much more people with networks, loud on Twitter. Maybe you thought that they were just people that tweeted memes, but now all of a sudden they're people that can invest, which excites me too.
Well, and I think, it solves a huge chicken and egg problem for a lot of emerging managers, right? Every LP asks you, what have you invested in before? And if you don't have money yourself to invest in large checks, like that is a question you just can't answer. I think rolling funds, takes advantage of that sort of influencer marketing, but it gives you an opportunity to say, look, let me go do 5 deals over the next year, prove that I have value, prove that I can, pick the next great companies. And assuming those companies do follow-on investments, you go out to LPs and now you have a track record to build upon.
One thing that I'm curious about this is if it's going to diversify the LP base, because I think a lot of the LPs are these family offices, there are these pension funds, university endowments, which is all kind of like a great cohort of money, but it's not all the money in the world. And not everyone gets to profit from that equally. And so if there's a way to diversify the LP base, let other people build, familial wealth, for example, through this sort of process, I think it's great. I'm curious to see, though, what happens in 6 months and if this initial boom dissipates or if we see a regularly kind of continued pace of fundraising by these rolling funds. But, it's going to be a long time until we see results.
Well, I think one of the big questions is, what is the future of the seed fundraise going to look like? We've seen party rounds, 8 years ago. We saw party rounds most recently with, what was that wine company we talked about that had a house with,
oh my
that's
gosh,
not spelled the way you think house is spelled, which had, 120 investors. But that's the future of the seed fundraise. I think you're going to see startups raise from 3, 4, 5 dozen rolling funds simultaneously. And that's going to put a lot of pressure on traditional seed funds who are used to buying all their ownership in one go. They're just not going to have the same opportunity to do that.
And I'll add, I feel like there has always been this wave of founders that invest in companies, but that seems even more prevalent now. And so I imagine that, we're going to see founders even more prominently on term sheets, especially at the seed stage.
Yeah, I'm always just worried though about founders who invest that much. I'm like, what are you doing at your day job? Why do you have two things? And being super polite about this because I don't know his current work setup, but Austin from Morning Brew announced on Twitter that he's going to put together a rolling fund, and he seems busy. So I'm going to be curious to see what that looks like kind of in practice. But whenever a startup CEO talks more about their angel investments than their startup, I begin to get concerned about their focus. So I'm sure Austin's going to do a good job. He's a smart guy. I like him. But it's an interesting kind of data point on the broader story.